Mr. Salim Al-Garni, Ms. Fatima Saad Al-Ghamdi, Mr. Yusuf Al-Sahafi,
Okay, excellent. Thank you to our panelists this morning, Dr. Abdullah, Mr. Yusuf, Ms. Fatima, Mr. Salim, and Ms. Khadija. I think if possible, I'd like to start with the teachers this morning. Okay, Mr. Salim, sir, what do you believe are the English learning expectations for students who are currently graduating high school?
Should I use the mic?
Yes, please, sir.
Okay, first, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What I think is the students should be able, skilled enough to be able to communicate with others, use their own thought to express themselves. So what I expect when students graduate from high school, so they are going to be able to communicate and express themselves, their thoughts. Excuse me, so it's my first time speaking in a crowd, and I'm just going to get lost because
no
my
problem.
first time speaking in the crowd.
You're doing a fantastic job, sir, the expectation to communicate. Now, Ms. Khadija, do you have anything to add to that? What do you believe are the English language learning expectations for students who are currently graduating in your classes?
We try to expect a very high level. They should be fluent in the language. They should be able to write very well, so they can graduate when they go into college. But sometimes that's not true. Their levels aren't really reaching.
No, we will hear from Dr. Abdullah in a minute, but Ms. Fatima, from a supervisor's point of view and a collective point of view, what are your thoughts?
My belief is all of our students their expectations are to be able to attend college with the minimal, at least the minimal proficiency skills in English. And sometimes our students are self-taught. Sometimes they do rely on their teachers. But a lot of times, most of them, their expectations, they fall lower than what they expect. And that's where we have a problem, and that's where we have an issue between us and the universities. They blame us and we blame them. So it's kind of like a cycle where you give us very low-level learners, and we say, well, you give us very low-level teachers. So it's kind of like a cycle that we need to break, but the expectations are always to be able to use the English language in their higher education proficiently, and I think that's
excellent. Thank you. I like that comment there, a cycle that we're trying to break, and I believe that the Centre for English Language will contribute to significantly bridging that gap between the expectations of both the K-12 and higher education sector. Now, Mr. Youssef, do you believe that there are perhaps different expectations from what the students expect to what the teachers expect?
Regarding those who are graduating
Yes,
from...
sir.
Yes. Okay, first of all, I think so. As a supervisor, my expectations are not that high, actually, because I'm living it, and I faced it I'm facing it on actually like daily basis at our schools, also through my relatives, neighbors, etc. So our expectations as educators are totally different than the student themselves, and not only the students but also the parents, the families back homes, because what I saw and realized is that there is a huge gap, or there is a noticeable gap between students who come from well-educated families and students who come from, let me say, less educated families. We hope that the level would be okay, but frankly speaking, a student finishing high school level without being able to write a short paragraph is a sign of drawback in our education system. Likewise, the students themselves, when you talk to them, they are frustrated. So they themselves, they do not have great expectations, or let me say, they don't have the self-esteem needed to be confident enough to take part in the community itself. And also, this is reflected in the life of the school,
that's
the
excellent.
university itself.
And that comes back to something that Dr. Thomas said. He said they don't have the self-confidence. You remember he had something up there that said, be brave. And he talked about not being afraid to make a mistake, and it's that sort of confidence as educators that you can perhaps look at instilling in your students. Now, Dr. Abdullah, sir, we've heard from the teachers and the supervisors. Now, do you think students are at the level they need to be in English when they graduate from high school in order to achieve their goals?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm afraid to say no, because expectations at the university level are quite different from those at the elementary or intermediate or even secondary level. We expect the students to communicate creatively and independently in real and unrehearsed contexts. The classroom is not a real context, because everything is manipulated. Questions asked to the students are manipulated. Sometimes answers that we get from students are manipulated to some extent. But I'd like to the students, if he or she goes to the college cafeteria, I would like him to order his coffee using English, communicate with the guy there using English. This is an example of a real context. If he or she gets a job during summer, I expect them to translate a piece from or into English. This is a real context. Another expectation is that I'd like the student entering university to develop deep content knowledge. In secondary schools, intermediate schools, too much focus is placed on skills. But in universities, we'd like to shift that focus. If the student gets into mathematical department, for example, he is dealing with a specialized language, so terminology is different, way of speaking is different, expectations are different.
Excellent, thank you, Doctor. I like the point about being able to use the language in a real-life situation. And I know King Saud University has an excellent cafeteria. Okay, so perhaps